It is so sad that you can't technically get the smell of a mobile game off of an adaptation. But yeah, this is my impressions of D-Side TRAUMEREI, the animation. This is a series that's airing in the summer 2021 anime season. I watched 2 episodes of it, and this is my impressions on it so far. But yeah, like I mentioned, technically, with most anime, you know what they're kind of a source of, and I think for some reason I thought that D-Side was going to be an original series, but as I started looking into it after pretty much halfway through the second episode, I started getting this really strong feeling of, this feels like a mobile game story. This feels like not really just a story, but just the beats of the show as it went along. It felt like a mobile game. And sure enough, what I ended up kind of reminding myself of is what we went through with our kind of preview of the season, was that this is kind of a mixed media project where they essentially make multiple things based on the same brand at the same time. So a mobile app is being created for it, an anime is being made for it, they might be making a manga and a light novel. They kind of make them all at the same time while touting the people that are creating it to kind of get this kind of attention to the whole thing as it happens. And of course, the big name that was behind this series is Hiroshi Onogi, who of course was the director or the script writer and the series composition writer for Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood, which obviously is a big deal. This is not a person that wrote the story for Fullmetal Alchemist, but essentially adapted the story into its form with the help of the director and everything for Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood, which was a phenomenal series. This is pretty much one of the greatest anime of all time. So it definitely gets a lot of attention there, even though, like I said, it's not technically the person that wrote the original story. It is the person that made it come to life in the anime adaptation. But even still, with that pedigree behind it, like I said, as I go through this show, I was feeling like the beats that were playing along felt like a mobile game. It felt like I was playing a mobile game that had these story beats that would play. A bad guy would happen, next story, here's the mascot character, here's the power-ups, here's each of the characters that are going to fight. All these little trappings that just made it less than what it technically can be if it doesn't have those restraints of being based off of a mobile game, essentially, in the end. All that being said, essentially the story opens up with a guy named Ryuhei, and Ryuhei is a kickboxer, and he's going about his regular day-to-day, and at some point he's having a dream where he's in another world where these weird monsters show up, oddly named Weird. These monsters called Weird show up. Some 2 people show up to help save him because these monsters are attacking him. They call them Weirds, and then at some point he wakes up and he goes about his life. He tells his friend about this weird dream he had, but he kind of goes about his life. And at some point he's walking down the street and he notices 2 people kind of run by him, and he notices this little portal at the side of this road, and he's like, what is this portal? And he keeps touching it, and at some point this monster comes out of it that looks just like the monsters that attacked him in his dream, and now he's in the streets of the city, and he's being attacked by these monsters while these 2 other kids are jumping around and attacking them and saving him every 2 seconds because he keeps getting attacked by the monsters. One of these kids, essentially, her name is Jessica. She has like a huge Gatling gun that she shoots the monsters with. The other one is Aruto, not Naruto, Aruto. He has like these not really roller skates, ice skates, and he kind of like skates around and kicks things like they're like blades. And at the same time, Jessica keeps telling Ryuhei, look, you have to be one of us because you're able to see this stuff and they're attacking you. And so obviously you're one of us, which they call themselves knocker-ups. I'm not making this up. These people that fight the Weirds are called knocker-ups. Not that they're trying to knock up these monsters or anything. But anyways, at some point, he remembers that when he was in his dream prior, he did actually manifest something, an attack. And it ends up being these big, huge boxer gloves that he manifests. And he does this goofy kind of transformation thing. And Aruto kind of jokes about the fact that he doesn't necessarily have to yell out knocker up to charge up. But he uses these gloves to kind of fight the monsters. And then following this fight, we kind of get a full idea of what's going on. Because when they beat the boss monster thing, it's trying to attack this one guy. And you'll find out from like some backstory that essentially the big boss monster that they end up fighting was the manifestation of the desires of this person who was playing this video game and lost his #1 ranking. And this group called the Desaria basically feed off of the desires of humans by allowing them to give up their wish and essentially themselves to become kind of melded with the weird and become this monster that attacks. But unfortunately, when they give up that wish, according to Aruto, they give up their life. They essentially, once they're defeated, they can never wake up again. So they're essentially dead. But Ryuhei is really interested in this because when they defeated him and he returned back to his human form, he had this mark on his forehead that's similar to the mark that his brother, who died a long time ago, made in a kind of, used his blood to create the symbol, and it looks the same sign as the symbol. So kind of insinuates that his brother was involved with this group. Either he was one of these that gave up his wish to the weird and the Desaria, or he at least fought them and for some reason decided to leave them behind a note with a symbol for some reason. So after this whole thing, it kind of continues on, and in the second episode, we essentially follow Eri, who is this very quiet girl. She kind of keeps to herself. She has a very strict curfew. Even though Ryuhei's friend Rena tries to make friends with her all the time, she's like, no, I got a curfew. I have to get home really immediately. And you'll see why that is. When she gets home, her father is very strict. He's abusive. He's like some kind of person involved with the police, like a chief commissioner or something like that. And every time she steps out of line, he beats the crap out of her mother. So this kind of forces her to have to kind of keep the strict schedule and to not anger her father, even though she obviously sees this as wrong. Well, this, of course, is something exactly what Desaria wants. And so the Desaria obviously go after Eri to get her to give herself up as well. And this, of course, manifests in this big monster that is seeking to kill her father. Best way to get rid of this problem is to get rid of your father. And so obviously, again, it kind of feeds into that wish that she has, and she becomes one of these monsters that meld with the weird. So, of course, the big shock there is, well, if Ryuhei defeats her, that means she's going to die, right? Well, anime, so obviously he manages to snap her out of it by saying, this is not what it's about to be strong, because they had this conversation with each other about her wanting to become stronger to protect her mother, obviously. And his whole thing was like, that's not what, getting strong isn't about hurting people. And this kind of desire snaps her out of it. And then she, of course, does this whole thing where she dresses up in a nice skimpy outfit offered by Rena, because Rena is kind of a gyaru kind of character. And so she dresses up all more punky and goes in there, and the father gets angry. And then she basically uses an audio recording of him talking about beating his wife to, force him to have to get a divorce. So that saved that whole scenario. So yeah, my thoughts. First of all, this is being done by Sanzigen. And for those who don't know who Sanzigen is, they're probably one of my favorite CGI studios. This is a full CGI show. Yeah, granted, there are some side characters that are done in 2D, like the father was done in 2D, because obviously they're not going to make a render for just a couple scenes. But Sanzigen, like I said, the thing I like about them the most is that they do a really good job of their cell shadedness, their actual textures and shading that they do on the actual character models themselves really do capture the essence of an anime character. That kind of 2D look, but it's still obviously rounded. It still obviously has a CGI feel to it and how it moves around, but at least it has the nice coloring and the nice styling that you would get from a normal actual 2D anime. And so I do really like the styling of the show. Now, granted, it still does have the trappings of CGI. It has the stiff walking. It still has certain aspects of it that still have that feel of a CGI that I don't necessarily like. It still looks good. The character designs and everything, they look good. The coloring looks good. The story so far, like I said, I'm struggling with it just because on the idea that it feels very formulaic. It feels like it's going to go in a very formulaic mood where you have, here's character, here character has problem feeds into the Desaria seek out the person, and then insert team to fight the monster. And while that's not necessarily a bad thing, at the same time, it does feel like it restricts what they can do with the storytelling and keeps it in a molding that honestly isn't all that interesting. Now, I will say that I did like Eri's story. I thought the second episode was definitely a huge step up. Granted, the first episode was an introduction to Ryuhei and him discovering the Desaria and the weird and the knocker-ups. Whereas the second episode was, okay, now let's tell a story about a character dealing with a situation. So It does have technically a better feeling of the writing with the second episode. So if you're going to, check this out, definitely just watch at least the second episode. It does get into some heavy content. Like I said, you technically have Eri dealing with spousal abuse and the controlling nature that abuse does bring into a family situation. So it is a very heavy subject. It does deal with that kind of depression and the fear that it creates in a person. And I thought that kind of portrayed that very well. Now, granted, in the end, it felt very easy how it kind of feels like it brushes it like, oh, well, I have a recording of you, so I can stop this whole thing. Because I could I had this inner thought where the mother's like, she turns and says, I've gotten stronger, haven't I, mother, after the whole situation. And I'm just thinking the mother's going, no, he's going to kill me later. Don't worry about it. It's not a very easy subject, but it still was a happy ending to give to it. I definitely want to get into another episode of this. I think a third episode is really going to tell me if that can shake that feeling of a mobile game storytelling. Because I think, like I said, that's something that I felt while I was watching it, and it's something I only confirmed after I went back and looked into the information about it. But like I said, it's still got good style to it, even though it is CGI. It looks good. The battles look good. It has Aoyuki in it, which at this point, I think we have 5 or 6 shows that Aoyuki's in. This is the second season that I've noticed her being in a lot of roles. I hope they're not ruining her voice. But yeah, I'm so mixed. I am so mixed on the show. Like I said, I think the third episode is really going to tell me if I'm going to like it or not. It has potential. It's just weighed down by its source. And we'll just have to see where it goes from here. But that's my thoughts on D-Side so far. Hope you guys enjoyed my impression. If you did, leave a like down below. Comment, let me know what you thought of the series if you're going to check it out. Subscribe if you haven't already. And I thank you all for watching. And y'all take care.